The Valori Dominion had ruled the galaxy for 40,000 years. They had conquered 100,000 star systems. They had crushed 10,000 species under their boots. They had never known defeat. High Arbiter Thesan stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Eternal Judgment, and watched the blue planet grow larger on the viewing screen, Earth, a small world orbiting a small yellow star in a forgotten corner of the galaxy. His scouts had found it 3 months ago during a routine expansion survey. The reports on his desk told him everything he needed to know about the creatures who lived there. Humans, they called themselves, a young species, barely 10,000 years into their civilization. They had split their world into many nations that often fought each other. They used primitive weapons that threw metal at high speeds. They had discovered nuclear energy, but used it mostly to threaten one another. Thesan almost felt sorry for them. Almost thought he had done this many times before. The process was simple. His fleet would arrive. They would give the species a choice, surrender everything and serve the Dominion, or die. Most species chose to serve. The few who chose to fight were destroyed within days. It never took longer than that. His fleet numbered 500 warships. Each one was larger than anything the humans had ever built. Each one carried weapons that could turn cities to ash in seconds. For a world like Earth, this was more than enough. In truth, Thesan could have sent 50 ships and achieved the same result. But he was a thorough man. The communications officer turned to face him. High Arbiter, we are in position. All ships report ready. Thesan nodded. Open a channel. All frequencies. All languages. The officer worked his console. Channel open. High Arbiter. Thesan spoke in the calm, bored tone of a being who had delivered this message 1,000 times. Attention, creatures of Earth. I am High Arbiter Thesan of the Valori Dominion. Your world now belongs to us. You will surrender all resources, all technology, and all military forces immediately. Your people will serve the Dominion for the rest of your existence. This is not a negotiation. This is not a request. You have one of your hours to comply. If you refuse, we will destroy your civilization and take what we want from your ashes. The choice is yours. He cut the channel and sat back in his command chair. Around him, his officers moved with practiced efficiency. They had done this so many times that it had become routine. Some of them were not even paying attention to the viewing screens. They were checking reports, reviewing schedules, planning what they would do after the simple conquest was complete. Thesan watched the planet below. He could see the lights of their cities on the dark side. So many lights, so many lives. They would soon learn their place in the universe. The hour passed slowly. Thesan used the time to eat a light meal and review the latest reports from other conquest fleets. The Dominion was always expanding, always hungry. There was always another world to take, another species to break. His communications officer spoke again. High Arbiter, we are receiving a response from the planet. Thesan set down his food. Put it through. A voice filled the bridge. It was a human voice, speaking in their strange language that the ship's computers translated instantly. The voice belonged to someone called the Secretary General of something called the United Nations. This is Earth's response to the Valori Dominion. We have received your demands. We have discussed them among ourselves, and we have reached a decision. Thesan leaned forward slightly. He already knew what they would say. They always said the same thing. Please give us more time. Please show us mercy. We will do anything you want. The voice continued. We decline. Thesan blinked. He was not sure he had heard correctly. We decline your offer of slavery. We decline your threats. We decline to give you anything. Earth is our home. We built it with our hands and our blood over thousands of years. We will not give it to you because you asked. We will not give it to you because you threatened. If you want our world, you will have to take it from us. And we promise you this. It will cost you more than you can imagine. The channel went dead. For a long moment, no one on the bridge spoke. Thesan stared at the viewing screen, his mind struggling to process what he had just heard. In 40,000 years, no species had ever refused the ultimatum. Some had tried to negotiate. Some had begged. Some had offered tribute. But none had ever simply said no. One of his junior officers laughed nervously. They must not understand what they are facing. Thesan said nothing. He was studying the planet below, seeing it with new eyes. These creatures had looked at his fleet, had seen the overwhelming force rage against them, and had chosen to fight anyway. It was foolish. It was suicidal. He pushed the thought away. It did not matter what it was. The result would be the same. All ships, he said quietly. Begin bombardment. Target their major population centers. Show them what happens to those who refuse the Dominion. The fleet moved with terrible precision. 500 warships took their positions around the planet. Energy weapons charged. Targeting systems locked onto the cities below. And then, at Theson's command, they fired. Great beams of light fell from the sky like the fingers of angry gods. They touched the cities of Earth, and those cities ceased to exist. In seconds, millions of humans died. Their buildings, their homes, their dreams all turned to fire and ash. Theson watched it happen on his viewing screen. He felt nothing. He had seen this many times before. The destruction of cities, the death of millions. It was simply how the universe worked. The strong took from the weak. The Dominion took from everyone. He expected the usual response: panic, screaming, desperate calls begging for mercy. He expected the humans to realize their mistake and crawl before him, offering anything to make the pain stop. But as the smoke rose from the burning cities below, as his sensors counted the dead in the hundreds of millions, something strange began to happen. The humans were not begging. They were not screaming. They were not falling apart. They were organizing. Across the planet, military forces began to move. Governments that had been enemies for generations suddenly joined together. Weapons were being distributed. Soldiers were being deployed. And from every corner of the planet, the same message began to broadcast on every frequency. They want war. Give them war. Theson felt something he had not felt in a very long time. He felt the cold touch of doubt. And as he watched the humans prepare to fight against impossible odds, he wondered if perhaps he had made a terrible mistake. The galaxy would soon learn the answer. The first 72 hours of the invasion were supposed to break humanity. That was how it always worked. The Valori had done this many times. They would destroy the major cities, kill millions of people, and watch the survivors fall into despair. Within days, the conquered species would be begging for mercy, offering anything to make the pain stop. But humanity did not follow the script. High Arbiter Theson stood on his bridge and read the reports coming from the planet below. His face showed no emotion, but inside, something cold was growing in his chest. The numbers did not make sense. Nothing made sense. 890 million humans had died in the first bombardment. 12 of their largest cities had been reduced to ash and glass. By every measure the Dominion used, this should have been enough. Every other species in the galaxy would have broken at 10% casualties. Humanity had lost nearly 10% of their population in a single day. They should have been finished. They should have been crawling. Instead, they were angry across the planet. Something remarkable was happening. Nations that had been enemies for centuries suddenly forgot their differences. Russia and America, China and India, Israel and Iran. Old hatreds that had burned for generations were set aside in a single night. Resources that had been hoarded were shared freely. Armies that had pointed weapons at each other now stood shoulder to shoulder. Humanity had found something more important than their old fights. They had found a common enemy. Subarbiter Krell was the commander of the ground forces. He had conquered 12 worlds in his career. He was considered one of the best field commanders in the Dominion. When his drop ships descended toward the burning cities of Earth, he expected to find broken survivors hiding in the rubble. He expected easy work. He was wrong. The first wave of Valori soldiers landed in what had once been a city called Chicago. The buildings were mostly destroyed. The streets were covered in ash and debris. Krell's soldiers moved through the ruins in perfect formation, their weapons ready, their sensors scanning for any sign of life. They found life. They found it in places they did not expect. A Valori soldier walked past a pile of rubble and a human rose up behind him. The human was small, covered in dust and blood, and held a piece of sharpened metal in its hand. Before the soldier could react, the human drove the metal into the gap between his helmet and his armor. The soldier fell. The human took his weapon and disappeared into the shadows. The scene repeated itself across the city. Humans emerged from sewers, from basements, from the rubble of collapsed buildings. They did not fight like soldiers. They fought like ghosts. They struck from nowhere, killed quickly, and vanished before the Valori could respond. Krell lost 50 soldiers in the first hour. He had never lost 50 soldiers in an entire conquest. He called for air support. Valori gunships descended and reduced entire blocks to rubble. When the dust cleared, the humans were still there. They had simply moved underground. And when the Valori soldiers entered the tunnels to hunt them, many of those soldiers never came back. The reports from other landing zones were the same. In Moscow, human soldiers were using the frozen tunnels of their metro system to ambush Valori patrols. In Beijing, civilians had turned factories into weapons plants, producing crude but effective explosives. In New Delhi, an army of volunteers was learning to fight using captured Valori weapons. Krell sent his first report to Thiessen. The situation is more difficult than expected. The humans do not behave like other conquered species. They do not run. They do not hide. They do not surrender. When we kill one, 10 more appear. They are using their knowledge of the terrain against us. They are learning our weaknesses faster than any species I have encountered. I am requesting additional forces. Thiessen read the report and felt anger rise in his chest. Krell was one of his best commanders. The idea that he could not handle a simple conquest was embarrassing. He sent back a single word: denied. 2 weeks passed. The Valori controlled more of the planet each day, but the cost was growing. Every building they captured had to be cleared room by room. Every street had to be swept for explosives. Every shadow could hide a human waiting to strike. The humans were learning. They studied captured Valori equipment and figured out how it worked. They found weaknesses in Valori armor that even the Dominion's enemies had not discovered. They learned that Valori soldiers needed to breathe a specific mixture of gases, and they began targeting their breathing apparatus. They learned that Valori joints were vulnerable, and they built weapons specifically designed to strike those joints. But what terrified Krell the most was what the humans were willing to do. On the 18th day of the occupation, Krell was inspecting a forward base in the ruins of Berlin. Security was tight. His guards were the best soldiers in his command. He should have been safe. A human child approached the perimeter. The child was small, maybe 10 years old, wearing torn clothes and carrying nothing visible. The guards scanned the child and found no weapons. They prepared to capture it for interrogation. The child smiled and pressed a button hidden in its hand. The explosion killed Krell instantly. It killed everyone within 50 meters of him. The child had been carrying explosives hidden inside its own body. Krell was the first arbiter to die on a conquest in 2,000 years. When news of his death reached the fleet, Thiessen stood alone in his quarters for a long time. He stared at the report and tried to understand what was happening. These creatures were supposed to be primitive. They were supposed to be weak. They were supposed to break. Instead, they were using their own children as weapons. Not because they were forced to, but because their children wanted to fight. What kind of species was this? What kind of beings would sacrifice everything, even their youngest, rather than submit? Thiessen had conquered many worlds. He had seen many forms of resistance, but he had never seen anything like this. He had never faced a species that simply refused to accept defeat. The humans did not seem to understand that they had already lost. They did not seem to care about the odds against them. They just kept fighting, and they were getting better at it. Word began to spread through the Valori fleet. Soldiers who had been eager for conquest now spoke of the gray world in whispers. Some requested transfers to other assignments. A few simply disappeared from their posts, choosing desertion over deployment to Earth. Thiessen replaced Krell with a new commander. Then another. Then another. Each one promised to end the resistance. Each one failed, 6 months into the occupation. The Valori had lost more soldiers on Earth than in their previous 300 conquests combined. And the humans were still fighting. Worse. Intelligence reports suggested that the humans had captured 3 intact Valori warships. They were taking them apart, studying them, learning their secrets. Thiessen looked at those reports and felt something he had not felt since he was young. He felt afraid, not of dying. He was not afraid of death. He was afraid of something much worse. He was afraid that he had awakened something that could not be stopped. The High Council of the Dominion demanded answers. Thesan assured them that Earth would fall within the year. But as he spoke those words, he knew in his heart that he was lying. The humans had become something more than resistance. They had become a force of nature. And forces of nature did not surrender. They only destroyed. 1 year into the occupation, the Valori Dominion controlled Earth, at least. That was what the official reports said. The reality was very different. On paper, the Dominion held all the major territories. Their flags flew over the ruins of human cities. Their soldiers patrolled the streets. Their ships dominated the skies. By every official measure, the conquest was complete. But the Valori had learned a terrible truth about humans. Controlling their land was not the same as defeating them. You could stand in a human city, surrounded by Valori soldiers, protected by Valori weapons, and still die at any moment, because the humans were everywhere, and they never stopped fighting. High Arbiter Thesan had stopped reading the daily casualty reports. They were too depressing. Instead, he focused on a different problem, understanding his enemy. He had ordered his psychology officers to study captured humans. These officers were the best in the Dominion. They had broken the will of 10,000 species. They had developed interrogation techniques that no being in the galaxy could resist. The humans resisted. Officer Vren was the chief interrogator. He had personally broken the spirits of leaders from 100 worlds. When he was given his first human subject, he was confident. He expected the process to take a few days at most. 3 months later, Vren submitted his resignation. The human had died during interrogation without revealing a single piece of useful information. In his final moments, with his body broken and his life fading, the human had looked at Vren and laughed. Vren never recovered from that moment. He told Thesan that he could not continue. "There's something wrong with these creatures," he said. "They do not respond to pain like other species. Pain makes them angry. It makes them stronger. I have never seen anything like it." The other interrogators reported similar results. Humans seemed to have a different relationship with suffering than any other species in the galaxy. Where other beings would break to make the pain stop, humans would endure the pain to deny their captors satisfaction. They treated resistance as a point of pride. Dying without talking was considered an honor. One captured human, a resistance leader named Colonel Miriam Okonkwo, was brought before Thesan himself. She had been responsible for destroying 17 Valori supply convoys. She had personally killed at least 30 Valori soldiers. She was considered the most dangerous human on the planet. Thesan studied her through the glass of her cell. She was small, much smaller than a Valori. Her skin was dark, her hair was gray, and her eyes were hard. She looked back at him without fear. "Why do you fight?" Thesan asked. "You must know that you cannot win. We have conquered 10,000 species. We have ruled the galaxy for 40,000 years. Your resistance is meaningless." Okonkwo smiled. It was not a pleasant smile. "You made a mistake," she said. "You did not kill all of us at once. When you destroyed our cities, you expected us to give up. But you do not understand what we are." "And what are you?" Thesan asked. "We are persistence hunters," she said. "Our ancestors survived by chasing prey across entire continents. They would follow an animal for days, weeks, never stopping, never resting, until the animal collapsed from exhaustion. We do not need to be faster than our enemies. We do not need to be stronger. We only need to never stop." Thesan said nothing. "You think this war has been going on for a year." Okonkwo continued. "To you, that seems like a long time. To us, it is nothing. We fought wars among ourselves that lasted 100 years. We have grudges that have survived for 1,000 years. We teach our children to hate our enemies, and they teach their children. And this continues for generations." She leaned forward, her eyes locked on his. "You should have killed all of us in the first hour, because now we know you exist, and we will never forget. We will never forgive. We will fight you for 100 years if we must, 1,000 years, 10,000 years. However long it takes, our great-great-grandchildren will still be fighting you. That is what you have awakened." Thesan left the cell without another word. He told himself that she was simply trying to frighten him, but he could not shake the feeling that she was telling the truth. The months continued to pass. The resistance did not weaken. If anything, it grew stronger. Humans had taken the captured Valori warships and completely disassembled them. In secret locations around the planet, human scientists and engineers were studying every piece of Valori technology. They were learning how it worked, and they were finding ways to make it better. This was the thing that truly terrified Thiessen. The Valori had spent 40,000 years developing their technology. They had refined it to perfection. Other conquered species had tried to copy it, but they never improved it. They simply made crude versions of what the Valori had already created. The humans were different. They did not just copy, they innovated. Intelligence reports showed that humans had taken Valori energy weapons and modified them to be more powerful. They had studied Valori shields and found ways to penetrate them. They had analyzed Valori communication systems and learned to intercept and decode Valori messages. In less than 2 years, the humans had made technological advances that had taken the Valori centuries to achieve, and they showed no signs of stopping. Thiessen finally understood what made humanity so dangerous. It was not their strength. It was not their numbers. It was not even their refusal to surrender. It was their ability to adapt. Every obstacle the Valori placed in their path, the humans found a way around. Every weapon used against them, they learned to counter. Every tactic employed against them, they studied and defeated. They were like water, flowing around every barrier, finding every weakness, never stopping until they reached their goal. And now they were building something in secret. The Dominion's sensors had detected activity in the asteroid belt between the 4th and 5th planets of the human system. Ships were being constructed there. Human ships, but with Valori technology. Thiessen sent scouts to investigate. The scouts did not return. He sent a warship. It found the remains of the scouts, floating in the void. And then it too was destroyed by weapons that should not have existed. The humans were no longer just defending. They were preparing to attack. Thiessen requested a meeting with the High Council. He told them what he had learned. He told them about the humans' refusal to break. He told them about their ability to adapt and improve. He told them about the fleet being built in the asteroid belt. The council dismissed his concerns. They are primitives, the Supreme Arbiter said. They cannot threaten the Dominion. Finish the conquest and stop wasting our time. Thiessen returned to his fleet with a heavy heart. He knew what was coming. He had seen it in Okonkwo's eyes. He had heard it in her words. The humans were not trying to survive the war. They were trying to win it. And for the first time in 40,000 years, Thiessen was not sure if the Dominion could stop them. 2 years after the invasion began, the impossible happened. High Arbiter Thiessen was on the bridge of the Eternal Judgment when the first alarms sounded. His sensors had detected a massive energy surge in the asteroid belt. Something was moving. Something big. Report, he demanded. His sensor officer stared at his screen with wide eyes. High Arbiter, I am detecting multiple contacts emerging from the asteroid field. They are using some form of stealth technology that we did not know the humans possessed. I count over 100 vessels. Thiessen felt his blood turn cold. 200 vessels. The humans had built an entire fleet in secret, right under the nose of the Dominion. And the Valori had not detected it until it was already moving. Show me, he said. The main viewing screen flickered and displayed the approaching fleet. Thiessen studied the ships and felt a mixture of horror and grudging respect. They were ugly things, built with brutal efficiency rather than elegance. They looked like they had been assembled from scrap metal and stolen parts. But they bristled with weapons, and their engines burned with power that should not have been possible. The humans had not just copied Valori technology. They had combined it with their own. And the result was something the galaxy had never seen before. High Arbiter, the communications officer said, we are receiving a transmission from the human fleet. Put it through. A human face appeared on the screen. It was a woman Thiessen recognized. Colonel Miriam Okonkwo, the prisoner who had told him about persistence hunters. Except she was no longer a colonel. Her uniform showed new insignia. She was an admiral now. High Arbiter Thiessen, she said. Her voice was calm and cold. 2 years ago, you came to our world and gave us a choice, slavery or death. We chose neither. We chose to fight. And now we are coming for you. Thiessen found his voice. "You cannot win this battle, Admiral. Your fleet is impressive, but we still outnumber you. We still have superior firepower. You are throwing away the lives of your people for nothing." Okonkwo smiled. It was the same terrible smile she had shown him in her cell. "You still do not understand us. We are not here to win a battle. We are here to send a message. Not to you. To every species you have enslaved. To every world you have conquered. We are here to show them that the Dominion can bleed." She leaned forward. "And we are here to make sure you never do this to anyone else again." The transmission ended. A moment later, the human fleet opened fire. Thiessen had fought many battles in his long career. He had faced enemies with superior numbers, superior technology, superior tactics. But he had never faced anything like the humans. Their ships did not fight like other ships. They did not form neat battle lines and exchange fire from safe distances. They charged directly into the Valori formation, weapons blazing, shields absorbing punishment that should have destroyed them. And when their shields failed, they kept coming anyway. The first Valori cruiser was destroyed by a human ship that flew directly into it. The human vessel was already crippled, its engines failing, its crew certainly dead. But someone had set the ship on a collision course, and nothing the Valori did could stop it. The explosion destroyed both ships and damaged 3 others nearby. This happened again, and again, and again. Human pilots ejected from their dying ships, not to escape, but to cross the void with explosive charges strapped to their bodies. They landed on Valori vessels and detonated themselves against the hulls. They crawled through breaches in the armor and fought hand-to-hand in the corridors. They died by the hundreds, but they took Valori ships with them. Thiessen watched in horror as his fleet began to break apart, not because the humans were winning. By every measure, the humans were losing. Their ships were smaller, weaker, fewer in number. They were taking catastrophic losses, but they were inflicting losses too, and the Valori were not used to losses. For 40,000 years, the Dominion had won every battle through overwhelming force. Their soldiers fought knowing they would survive. Their officers planned knowing they would triumph. They had no experience with doubt. They had no training for fear. And now they were facing an enemy that did not care about death, an enemy that treated its own destruction as an acceptable cost of victory, an enemy that would burn itself to ashes if it meant taking the Dominion down with it. The Valori lines began to waver. One ship broke formation and retreated. Then another. Then 10 more. The careful discipline of the Dominion fleet shattered like glass under a hammer. Ships that had never known defeat fled from an enemy they could not understand. Thiessen screamed orders, trying to rally his forces. But it was too late. The fear had spread through his fleet like a disease. Soldiers who had conquered worlds now ran from a species they had dismissed as primitive. And still the humans came. The human fleet had lost more than half its ships. They should have retreated. Any sane enemy would have retreated. But they pressed forward, hunting down fleeing Valori vessels, finishing off damaged ships, chasing the survivors toward the edge of the system. Thiessen made a decision he never thought he would make. He ordered a full retreat. The eternal judgment turned away from Earth and accelerated toward deep space. Around it, the remnants of the subjugation fleet followed. They had come to conquer a world. They were leaving as refugees. As the fleet fled, Thiessen received one final transmission from Admiral Okonkwo. "We are no longer defending," she said. "We are coming. Run back to your masters. Tell them what you saw here. Tell them that Earth still stands. And tell them that we will find every species you have enslaved, and we will set them free." Her eyes burned with cold fire. "You wanted war with humanity. Now you have it. And it will not end until one of us is gone from the galaxy." The transmission ended. Thiessen sat in silence as his ship fled toward the galactic core. He had conquered 12 worlds in his career. He had never lost a single battle. And now he was running from a species that had not even possessed starships 3 years ago. The Dominion had ruled the galaxy for 40,000 years. They had crushed every enemy they had ever faced, but they had never faced an enemy like humanity. And Thiessen knew, with terrible certainty, that the galaxy would never be the same. Behind him, Earth grew smaller in the viewing screen. The human fleet had stopped pursuing. They were returning to their world, to rebuild, to prepare for what came next. The battle was over. The humans had won, but the war had just begun. 6 years after the Valori Dominion invaded Earth, the galaxy was a different place. The Supreme Council of the Dominion set an emergency session for the 100th time that year. The Great Chamber, which had witnessed 40,000 years of victory and triumph, now felt like a tomb. The council members no longer spoke of conquest and expansion. They spoke of survival. The humans had not stopped at liberating their own world. They had done something far more dangerous. They had started a revolution that the Terran Accord, as humanity's new government called itself, had spent the years after the Battle of Earth building a new kind of fleet, ships that were faster, stronger, and more deadly than anything the galaxy had seen. Ships crewed by humans who had grown up knowing only war, who had been raised on stories of the invasion, who burned with a desire to make sure no other species would ever suffer what Earth had suffered. And then they had started looking for friends. The Dominion had enslaved thousands of species over the millennia. Most of them had forgotten what freedom felt like. They had served for so long that they could not imagine any other way of life. The Valori counted on this. A slave who cannot imagine freedom will never rebel. But then the humans came. They arrived at enslaved worlds not as conquerors, but as liberators. They broadcast the story of Earth to every planet they visited. They showed recordings of the invasion, the resistance, the impossible victory. They proved that the Dominion could be defeated, and they offered weapons. The first world to rise up was Keleth Prime, home of the insectoid Keleth who had served the Dominion for 8,000 years. The Keleth had long ago accepted their fate. They believed that resistance was impossible, that the Dominion was invincible. Then a human ship arrived in their system. A single ship, small and battered. It was met by a Dominion patrol and ordered to surrender. The human ship destroyed the patrol in 17 seconds. The Keleth watched in stunned silence as this small vessel from a distant world did what they had believed could not be done. They watched as a human captain named Chen broadcast a message to their planet. "We are from Earth," she said. "6 years ago, we were like you. We were attacked by the Dominion. We were supposed to surrender. We refused, and we won. We are here to tell you that you can win too. We are here to help you become free." Within 1 month, the Keleth had risen against their Dominion overseers. Within 3 months, they had driven the Valori from their system. And they were not alone. World after world followed Keleth Prime. Species that had been broken for millennia suddenly remembered what it meant to hope. They looked at the humans and saw something they had never seen before. Proof that the Dominion was not invincible. The Dominion tried to crush their rebellions. But every time they moved forces to one system, 2 more would rise up. The humans were everywhere, providing weapons, training, information. They had turned the entire galaxy into a battleground. Former High Arbiter Thiessen, now stripped of his rank and disgraced, was summoned before the Supreme Council. They demanded that he explain what had happened. How had a single primitive species caused so much destruction? Thiessen stood before the council and spoke the truth. "I have studied these creatures for 6 years. I have read every report, watched every recording, analyzed every battle. And I have finally come to understand what we are facing." He paused, gathering his thoughts. "We made an error. We thought the humans were weak because they were young. We thought they were primitive because they had not yet reached the stars. We were wrong. The humans are persistence hunters. Their ancestors survived by chasing prey across entire continents until the prey collapsed. From exhaustion. They do not need to be faster than their enemies. They do not need to be stronger. They simply need to never stop. They will chase their prey forever if they must." He looked at the council members, seeing the fear in their eyes. "We did not conquer Earth. We awakened it. We showed humanity that there were other worlds to reach, other species to meet, other enemies to fight. And now they will not rest until they have found every species we have enslaved and set them free. They do not hate us because we attacked them. They hate us because of what we have done to others. They see themselves as protectors of the weak, and they will destroy us not for revenge, but to ensure that we can never harm anyone else again." The Supreme Arbiter spoke. "Then what do you suggest? How do we stop them?" Thiessen was silent for a long moment. Then he said the words that no Valori had ever spoken in 40,000 years of Dominion rule. "We do not stop them. We surrender, The council erupted in outrage. But Thesan continued speaking over the noise. The humans could destroy us. They have the power. They have the will. But they have not done so. Instead, they are offering us a choice. The same choice we once offered them: change or be destroyed. If we continue to fight, we will lose. The humans will not stop, and the species we have enslaved will tear us apart with their own hands. But if we surrender, if we accept their terms, we may survive. A Dominion envoy was sent to Earth. For the first time in 40,000 years, the Valori came to another species not as conquerors, but as supplicants. They were met by Admiral Miriam Okonkwo, now the leader of the Terran Accord. She was older now, her hair completely white, but her eyes were still hard as stone. The envoy presented the Dominion's offer: peace in exchange for recognition of humanity's independence. Okonkwo listened in silence. Then she spoke. You came to our world and killed almost 1 billion of our people. You expected us to kneel. You expected us to serve. Instead, we rose up and broke your empire. And now you come to us offering peace? The envoy nodded nervously. We will give you peace, Okonkwo said. But you will earn it? You will release every species you have enslaved. You will pay reparations to every world you have harmed. You will submit to oversight to ensure you never do this again. And you will remember. Remember what? The envoy asked. Remember what happens when you attack a world that refuses to kneel. She leaned forward. You killed almost 1 billion of us and expected us to surrender. Be grateful we are offering you survival. The Dominion accepted the terms. They had no choice. Across the galaxy, species that had been slaves for thousands of years walked free for the first time. They looked to the stars and spoke the name of the species that had saved them: humans. The persistence hunters, the ones who never stopped. The Valori had ruled the galaxy through fear of what they would do. But now there was a new power in the galaxy. And the galaxy did not fear what humans would do. They feared what humans could do, and chose not to. The humans had the power to destroy the Dominion completely. They had the anger, the strength, the will. But instead of vengeance, they chose mercy. Instead of extinction, they chose restraint. And that restraint was more terrifying than any weapon. Because the galaxy now understood a simple truth: the humans were not conquerors. They were guardians. They would protect the weak. They would punish the strong who abused their power. And they would never, ever stop. On Earth, the cities that had been destroyed were rebuilt. The names of the dead were carved into monuments that stretched to the sky. And children grew up knowing that their parents and grandparents had faced impossible odds and won. Humanity had looked into the darkness of the galaxy and found it wanting. They had been tested by fire and emerged as something new, something the galaxy had never seen before. Not conquerors, not victims, something more dangerous than either. They had become humanity, and the galaxy would never forget.